1 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 6 through 13. Your boasting is not good. Don't you know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough? Get rid of the old yeast, so that you may be a new unleavened batch as you really are, for Christ our Passover lamb has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us keep the festival, not with the old unleavened bread, with malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people, not all, meaning the people of this world who are immoral, or the greedy or swindlers or idolaters. In that case, you would have to leave this world. But now I am writing to you that you must not associate with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister, but is sexually immoral or greedy or an idolater or slanderer or drunkard or swindler. Do not even eat with such people. What business of it is mine to judge the outside world? Are you not to judge those inside? God will judge those outside. Expel the wicked person from among you. So we are getting to the end of chapter 5, and we're really looking at this issue of church discipline. And in this passage, and so it's too big, for us to fit on one screen. So you're going to see me kind of floating back and forth. But in this passage that we are looking at today, Paul is going to give us some guidelines for the holiness of the church, for church discipline, and then he's going to get to a piece on judgment that's going to be really interesting as we compare it to what was written in chapter 4. But let's begin. He begins by saying this: your boasting is not good. And so there is a reference to what he said in chapter 5, verse 2, but also in chapters 1 through 4. They were, remember, prideful in the previous passage. And so your boasting is not good. Your pride is not good. And this is why. So we could ask ourselves, why is this not good? This is the answer right here. Don't you know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough? Don't you know, brothers and sisters, that there is a little yeast among you, and if left unchecked, the whole batch of dough will be leavened? The little yeast, of course, should be a reference, and this should be obvious, but a reference to the brother who was in a incestual relationship with his stepmother. This little yeast will leaven the whole batch of dough. Therefore, right, and we could insert that right here. Therefore, get rid of the old yeast so that you may be a new unleavened batch as you really are. So let's unpack that. Get rid of the old yeast. This is that practice of church discipline, to hand this brother over to Satan for the destruction of his flesh so that he may be saved. So that deals with church discipline to save someone. That should be one of the motives that we have before, and that's what we see in verses 1 through 5. But in verses 6 through 8, we get a second reason. And this is for the purity and health of the church. So get rid of the old yeast, because remember, you could leaven the whole batch. This little sin could spread in many ways throughout the rest of the body. Get rid of the old yeast so that, we want to pay attention to words like so that, for, we want to pay attention to commands like get rid of. So this so that, there's a reason why we must get rid of this, so that you may be an unleavened batch as you truly are, as you really are. For, and we want to pay attention to words like for. This is going to give us the theological reason for why we should be an unleavened batch. We do not want to be a leavened batch. We want to be a unleavened batch. And that means we don't want to be dough with yeast working its way through. We want to be a yeastless dough. So yeast here is just a reference to sin. Now, in other places in the Bible, it might be in the positive, but for here, it's in the negative. For Christ, our Passover lamb has been sacrificed. And this is important because part of the Passover lamb sacrifice was unleavened bread. And so what he's using here is not to say that we are the unleavened bread of Passover, but as we'll see, that we can keep celebrating our own Passover by being unleavened bread. Let me show you how. Verse 8. Therefore, again, just a very important word, especially as you're going through epistles, pay attention to words like that. Therefore, let us keep the festival. Let's keep the Passover, which is a strange thing to say, right? Because we're not celebrating our exodus from Egypt. We're celebrating our exodus from sin. But we're keeping the festival. How? Not with the old bread leavened with malice and wickedness, so getting rid of sin, but with the unleavened bread, which again is what you would use during the Passover, with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So getting rid of sin and putting on righteousness, we can keep the Passover in a way. Christ is our Passover lamb. We're not celebrating what happened in Egypt. We're celebrating what happened at Calvary, at Golgotha. We're celebrating our salvation. So celebrate salvation. How? Not with the old unleavened bread, not by living sinfully, but being the new unleavened batch that we are in Jesus. So celebrate salvation by living righteously. And this, it's important to know, is not righteous. Wow, that it was very misspelled. Righteously. Celebrate salvation by living righteously, and not in a individual sense. Living righteously in a corporate sense. We celebrate, we keep Jesus and celebrate the Passover of our salvation, of being delivered from slavery to sin by living righteously in a corporate sense. And so we've got to get rid of yeast when it begins to show up in the body. Now, what's not clear in these verses, what's open to interpretation, is how does a little yeast leaven the whole batch? Because of this one ancestral brother, will one sin of incest lead to hundreds of sins of incest? I don't think that's what this means. So I'm going to say to that idea that, if one person has incest, soon everybody will be having incest. I don't think that's what Paul means. I think what Paul means is that this one sin of incest can lead to lots of sin in the whole batch. Let's think about that. If we leave room for a little bit of sin, then what else will we leave room for in the rest of the batch of dough, when other things, as we see here, like immoral, greed, swindlers, idolaters, when these things begin to show up in the body, if we've already made room for incest, will we not also make room for those things? So when sin shows up in this public and unrepentant way, we have got to get rid of it. We are the new unleavened batch. We keep celebrating that salvation by living righteously corporately. Okay. That's the first section. Let's get into this next passage. I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with the sexually immoral. This here, my letter, means that 1 Corinthians is actually the second letter. So there was a letter before 1 Corinthians, and we don't have it, and that's okay. In that letter, Paul said not to associate with the sexually immoral. This word associate is a really interesting word. Um, I feel like the definition is very broad in English, which can make it difficult, but it's literally it means to be mixed up with. Don't be mixed up with. Don't have in the pure sorry, not the old unleavened, but with this new unleavened bread, don't be mixed up with yeast, right? So don't have them in your life. Don't be partners with them in business. Don't be friends with them at the dinner table. Don't do life together with them. Don't have them in fellowship with the sexually immoral. And then Paul clarifies this. Not all, meaning what? The people of this world who are immoral, actually, it goes, or the greedies or swindlers or idolaters. So this is not what he's talking about. Not the people of the world. So not the non-believer. In that case, you would have to leave this world. So if we're going to do that, we'd have to just exit the earth. And, some people try to do this. This is kind of one of the ideas behind certain communities of Christians that have exited modern society. They're trying to get away from the immoral, the greedy, the swindler, the idolater. And Paul's point is pretty straightforward. You would have to leave this world. This is really a word against the monastic lifestyle. We're not going to achieve righteousness by living apart from the world. That's going to come one day, but it'll happen in heaven. But now he's clarifying this statement up here. But now I am writing to you that you must not associate, again, that same word, don't be mixed up with anyone who claims to be a brother or sister. This is the opposite of this. We'll see that their behavior is the same, but that their claim is different. So if someone doesn't claim to be a believer, if they're clearly not a Christian, and they're living as a greedy, idolating swindler who's sexually immoral, you don't have to avoid that person. Actually, the one that you're not to associate with is the one who claims to be a brother or sister, but has the same lifestyle, but is a sexually immoral, greedy, idolater, slanderer, drunkard, swindler. Those are the things. When someone claims to be a brother or sister, when someone says, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, but they're living in open sexual sin, they're living in greed, the love of money is clear upon their life, they're an idolater, they're openly worshiping other gods, they're a slanderer, they attack other people, they attack other Christians, they are a drunkard, they're consumed by wine, they live for wine, they live for their addictions. They're a swindler. They would cheat people for money. When someone claims to be a brother or sister and they live such a way, then, we'll supply that, then do not even eat with such people. When this condition exists, then do not even eat with such people. That's what it means to disassociate. You don't even eat with them. And this is important for us because, we've got to ask ourselves a little question here. If someone were under church discipline, would they even notice? If you were out of fellowship with the body, would it even make a difference in who you see and who you talk to in a given week? If it doesn't, then we've got a lot of work to do in terms of hospitality and fellowship. Okay. Paul ends by saying this: what business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? The world is, and this word judge here is the same word meaning pass judgment, not just to examine, but to pass judgment. It's not my business to pass judgment on those outside the church. God is going to do that. It's not my job to, disassociate the church from the outside world. Otherwise, we'd have to leave the world. What business am I to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside the church? And this is crazy because it goes exactly against what he said in chapter 4 when he said, judge, nothing. He said, judge nothing before the other time. And it was that same word. It was that word pass not to pass examination, pass judgment. Oh, I'm so sorry. That was probably confusing. Don't pass judgment. Do not pass judgment on those outside the church. In chapter 4, he said, don't pass judgment before the appointed time. And then right now, here he says, it's our business to pass judgment on those inside the church. Well, he just said literally the exact opposite thing just a couple hundred words prior. What's going on? What is Paul trying to say? And the answer is context. So the context of chapter 4 was judging faithfulness in serving God. It's not our business to look at a brother or sister who is serving the Lord and saying that person is not faithful, or that person is faithful. That's not our job. The context in 5 is open, unrepentant sin. And in this case, it is our business. So don't do this one, but we must do this one. We must pass judgment on those who are living in open and unrepentant sin, because going back up to the beginning, we are to be a unleavened bread. We are this in Christ Jesus, and so we must live this now. And so we will have to do some judging. We are to judge those inside if they're living in open, unrepentant sin. God will judge those outside. Okay, so that's what's going to happen here. But as for those inside, expel the wicked person from among you. And notice that's in quotations. This is very much an Old Testament way of dealing with uncleanness in the camp and uncleanness in the people of God. And all of these laws in the Old Testament, which spoke to just cleanness and uncleanness, when we have someone who is living in this open, unrepentant sin, this obvious uncleanness, spiritually speaking, it is our job to expel the wicked person from among you, to remain the unleavened bread of Christ and celebrate the Passover. Celebrate that God has made us new. So again, not the Old Testament Passover, but this New Testament Passover where Jesus is our Passover lamb. So that's what we've got going on in this text. A lot here to guide our understanding of church discipline. I want to return to this top piece in verses 1 through 5. We do church discipline to save. In verses 6 and 8, we do it to protect the purity and health of the church. In verses 9 through 11, we are to be living in the world, but not of the world. We're not going to try to live this monastic lifestyle. What we're actually doing is not associating with those who claim to be brothers or sisters, but are living in sinful lives, because it's not our business to judge those outside the world, but it is our business to pass judgment on those brothers or sisters who are living in unrepentant sin. Let's not confuse that with judging the faithfulness of a brother or sister in serving the Lord. So a lot of nuance to these things. Take the time to pour into it and to understand it, to understand the context, so that when we get to just very different instructions from Paul, we can understand what's going on. God bless.